I've worked in a job that only ever deals with the bad side of things. But I always set myself this idea that the minute I cease to be shocked or angry, that was the time to hang up my boots and move on. We know that he killed in 1987, but even I didn't think that as a human race we could be so cruel. And it's that moment when you first plug in the hard drive and you look at what you're confronted with, that's when the kind of reality of the case can start hitting home. You catch your breath, and you know that what you are seeing is so far out of anyone's frame of reference. This is not a human being doing this. So this has to be something other. This is a monster. Those things, they haunt you, and they can haunt you for a long, long time.
I think this job is still very raw with me. It's the hardest case I've ever worked on, but I wouldn't have not wanted to be involved.
Straight in.
I just kept thinking to myself that we are going to actually arrest the person who was responsible for two of the longest running unsolved murders in British criminal history, and the person that people still lived in fear of.
Hello. Morning, it's the police. Hello, we need to come and speak to you.
I was only 7 years old when these murders happened, but they were massive in Tunbridge Wells. I grew up knowing full well that the person responsible for these murders was still on the loose.
Seize the drawer, pull the drawer out, put it in the bag.
Yeah, you just want the whole lot done.
I'll have the whole lot, yep. I'll have that one as well.
If I'm honest, I don't think anyone could have predicted what we were going to find when we searched his house.
Are they ones he's taken?
Well, why does that person look
Dead.
The investigation has stolen a piece of my soul, and I'm confident that I'm not the only officer that feels that.
In 1987, Tunbridge Wells was a really nice place to be. It was affluent, very sort of middle class. You know, I was 18, then 19, and I think you have this sort of feeling of invincibility, don't you, that nothing's going to happen to you, and it is perfectly all right to be walking back over the common late at night. We lived a nice life there at that time.
The summer of 1987 is a summer I'll not forget. I was head of Kent CID, which entailed the investigation of all serious crimes committed in the Kent police area. Just as in most towns, Tunbridge Wells has got certain areas where older houses are being converted into flats and bedsits, and I was made aware that there were increasing reports coming in of prowlers. Imagine you're a woman alone in your bedsit, and you look up and you see a shadow looking through your window. Terrifying. Prowlers are difficult to catch. They know the back alleys. They may have been doing it for years, and they get away with it. We received a call. A young woman's body had been found in a bedsit by her boyfriend. She lived in Guildford Road, which is one of the areas where we knew that there was prowler activity.
It was a tiny flat, a one-room bedsit. Over in one corner there was a partially opened window, and then you could see laying on the bed was what appeared to be a body covered in a duvet. There was blood staining on the floor at the side of the bed. There was blood spatters on a wall. The body was laying on her left-hand side with her knees slightly bent, and rather than just dumped there, appeared to have been just carefully placed. Once we uncovered the body, you then saw that there was obviously signs of a head injury. We removed the duvet, the pillowcases, to preserve them. There was a pink towel which appeared to be blood-stained, and there was also a blood-stained plastic bag.
At the post-mortem, it was established that the woman had received a heavy blow to the head, had been strangled, and then been sexually assaulted. She was 25 years old, and her name was Wendy Nell.
When Dad got the call, he drove straight down to Wendy's flat. Police were everywhere, swarming around. He tried to get in, and they wouldn't let him. They just said the girl inside the flat was dead. So that's how he found out his daughter had died. My name is Jane, and Wendy Nell was my little sister. Everyone loved her. No one I've spoken to ever had a bad word about her. I was the quiet, boring, sensible one, and she was the daft, scatty, silly one. She left home and got married, and it didn't work out at all, so she ended up having to get divorced. But she come through it the other side and made a new life for herself. Wendy had a good career starting after that. She got a job in a shop called Super Snaps. She enjoyed it, and she made her way up to manageress. She got a new fellow and he lived over Tunbridge Wells as well, so it gave her a very, very good new start. Mum's 85 now, and I still think she finds it hard to process this.
She was killed in June on her father's birthday. She only lived 25 years. She would be 60 this year. Once we got the news, it was like part of you had died, if you know what I mean. And you knew you'd got to carry on, but you didn't know how. You didn't want to believe it, but you've got to believe it. I've got a photo next to my bed of Wendy, taken just before she was killed. And I always kiss it night and morning. It's the only way I've got of seeing her. That keeps me going. And it gives me that, I don't know what it is, but it gives me something. It hurts more than anything. I don't think I'm the same person. You'll have to ask my daughter that one.
Initially, when this all happened, the police interviewed literally everyone. Everyone, you know, was a suspect. Her boyfriend, my dad, even my husband. They literally interviewed everybody.
At 12 o'clock, BBC Radio Kent News. Police today issued a fresh appeal for witnesses following the murder of the Tunbridge Wells shop manageress Wendy Nell earlier this week.
This was a gruesome murder of a young woman alone, so there was a lot of public expectation, especially in a town like Tunbridge Wells.
Wendy, who was 25, was found battered to death in her bedsit in Guildford Row.
We knew this neighbourhood had a problem with prowlers, but this murder took us to another level. There was nothing that we wouldn't do to try and catch that killer.
As the murder hunt is stepped up, police are warning other women in the bedsit land to be on their guard, and they're appealing to anyone who spots a prowler to contact them immediately.
The town suddenly became not a safe place to be anymore. And you had to think twice about, well, should I be walking home this way or that way or at all? But I think we all assumed that the police would catch whoever did it and that would be the end of it. We had no idea where it was going.
"25-year-old Wendy Nell was sexually assaulted and beaten to death. Police describe it as one of their most complicated murder investigations for years.
There was no sign of a false entry, and the door to her flat was locked. There was one window into the bedsit which wasn't totally secure and could have been a means of entry. From the scene itself, it appears that the killer likes to be in control. Wendy's clothes were piled in a neat pile. Her bed was tidied. That's not the hallmark of somebody in a rage. That is somebody who's methodical and controlled. Our officers at the scene collected every bit of evidence that they could. In those days, we couldn't rely on DNA analysis because it was in its infancy. There was a shoe print on the sleeve of a blouse in blood, and we looked at all the shoe shops in Tunbridge Wells, and it was identified as being from a particular clerk's shoe. It wouldn't have solved the crime on its own, But put together with other evidence, it was very useful.
Police have already visited every home in the area and taken 200 statements, but say they want more help from the public.
We interviewed people from all over the surrounding areas, people who were stalkers and prowlers, but we just didn't have that break.
The picture built up is of a moody and vicious killer, a man who goes out on his own late at night, returning home in the early hours.
There was an event at the Assembly Hall in Tunbridge Wells. Police were talking about what we can do to be as safe as possible, and we were all given post-personal alarms, those screech-type things. I think we were supposed to carry those around in our handbags and use them if we were attacked. It felt like, actually, this is very, very dangerous. If they're doing this, then things are really bad. Suddenly it wasn't nice little Tunbridge Wells, it was unsolved murder town.
The first of this month's reconstructions tells the story of a 25-year-old woman who lived alone in a bedsit. Local residents recalled two events that night. At 12:30, a peeping Tom was spotted outside a house in nearby Grove Hill Road. And at 1:10, neighbours remember a car, possibly a blue Talbot Horizon, having difficulty starting outside Wendy's house.
At this point, we really had no idea who the killer was. Was it somebody who'd been following her about, stalking her?
We need to eliminate that. It was a light blue or grey Talbot Horizon. It left Guildford Road. Did anybody see it leaving Guildford Road? Or did you see it arrive near where you live sometime in the early hours?
It was established that a couple of things were missing. A diary for 1987 and some keys.
The keys are quite distinctive.
The key fobs she brought back from a recent holiday in Austria.
The whole thing is one mighty jigsaw puzzle that you're trying to put together.
At 8:30, as usual, Wendy Nell left her bedsit for her 15-minute walk to work.
That was surreal, seeing some woman pretending to be my sister.
Right. All you've got to do is check the prices on them and put them into the calculator.
Talking and a haircut similar. Getting off a motorbike and dressing like she did. That was really quite painful.
Was her killer, do you think, someone she knew, or was this an opportunist crime? Do you know?
Well, I'm hoping that a telephone call tonight will answer that question for us.
They still didn't get anywhere, and the time just went on and on and on. I think Dad took the news of the sexual assault really bad, but he didn't talk about it very much. It was heartbreaking, with them not finding anything or not finding him.
He's on the loose now in the Tunbridge Wells area, we understand. How worried are you about that?
I'm very concerned. He may not be in the Tunbridge Wells area, but I'm very concerned that at this time we haven't charged anyone with it.
It was the sort of crime you take home with you and think about. What have I missed? Have I missed something important? I was feeling frustrated because my detectives were working very hard to find the killer.
We believe we've got a clear picture in our own minds of what the man is like, and we don't feel that we're that far away from capturing him. We just need that little bit of extra help from the public.
The truth was, we didn't have any one major suspect. And then I received a call that another young woman had been reported missing.
And jump out.
605. 605.
Cool. Do you stand up?
The day was always going to come when the truth was going to catch up with him. I think once he was at the police station, he knows that he's already on that path to prison.
What's the offence?
Suspicion of murder.
I did hear comments from other police officers asking whether we were sure we'd got the right person, because he appeared on the outside to be a decent old man. Nothing untoward about him. He had a family, he had children, but actually we weren't dealing with the man in front of us today. It was the person 33 years ago who was young, athletic and very fit.
Okay. And what cell are we going to?
It's horrific what he did back in 1987. But it's all the other stuff that then came afterwards that I wasn't expecting. His offending over the years has been relentless. And we established that he was offending up to 3 days before his arrest.
Back in 1987, just come out of school, just having a really nice time. There was this freedom of not being at school anymore. It was a real adventure, actually. I think my mum and dad were completely exasperated. I think they'd expected I would go to university, and I think their heart must have sunk when I said, I'm going for a job at Buster Brown's. That'll be fun. It was an American restaurant. Everyone was very, very friendly. You'd finish a shift at midnight, 1 o'clock sometimes, and we'd end up round to someone's house. And, new friendships were made. I'd known of Caroline. She'd been at my primary school and then at secondary school as well, although she was a year above us. She was a manager at Buster Brown's. She'd already been there for a year or so when I started. So Andy worked up in the cocktail bar in Buster Brown's. Very good-looking guy, very cool, very fun. There was never a dull moment when Andy was about, and everyone was swept up by him. And he got together with Caroline.
Something about her I was just drawn to her straight away. There was a certain force about her. We started seeing each other round about October, November in '86. Caroline was like my first proper relationship, and we moved in together. It was quite a big thing. I was very happy.
She had an energy about her, and sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad, but she was always up for doing something. She was right there, and she'd be at the centre of it. Andy was so doting, he looked after her, and they just had a lovely time together. And yeah, they were certainly the first couple I knew that moved in together. I thought it was very grown up and exciting. And it was, I think, for quite a while for both of them.
Over a period of time, I started to feel there's a distance between Carol and myself. I think that she had started aspiring to something else, and then she started mentioning she wanted to move out. There was another waitress at the restaurant who had a bedsit in Tunbridge Wells, and she was moving out of it. She had felt a bit anxious there because on several occasions they'd thought they'd seen a peeping Tom through the window. I didn't like the idea of Caroline moving in there, but she moved in. One evening, she rang me up late at night saying she thought she may have seen somebody through the window. So I went straight round there, and she was a little bit unsettled and said, would I stay there? I said, yeah, of course.
Did you try and tell Caroline, look, please don't move there?
Yeah, I suggested it's not a good place to move to, you know, but... Sorry.
I remember she'd come up to my house. We were cooking a chili con carne. And then when that was done, we dropped her into town. And that was the last time I saw her. Caroline hadn't turned up for work on that day, and obviously people were making phone calls. Have you seen Caroline? Have you heard from her? Has anyone seen Caroline? And suddenly she was a missing person. Nobody knew where she was.
20-year-old Caroline Pierce was last seen when a taxi driver dropped her near her home in Grosvenor Park in Tunbridge Wells around midnight on November the 24th.
You have a missing woman. Do you have any reason at all to suppose that something serious might have happened to her?
Obviously, when a 20-year-old goes missing, in the circumstances that I've described here, we have to be concerned.
Caroline worked in Buster Brown's restaurant in Camden Road, Tunbridge Wells. This is the same road where Wendy Nell worked.
You had the similarities of Wendy Nell, 25-year-old woman living alone in a bedsit. Now we've got another young woman, 20 years old, living in a bedsit about a mile away from where Wendy lived. Those two factors alone were enough to raise considerable concerns.
As police continue their search for clues here in Tunbridge Wells, they've warned women in the town to be extra vigilant, and they've increased the number of routine foot patrols.
It wasn't until my officer started house to house where Caroline lived that neighbours told us about the screams.
Police told us that 9 different sets of neighbours had reported hearing screams that night. And no one had done anything about that.
The screams were described as being loud screams to start with, but dying off.
She was dropped off at about 4 minutes to midnight, and about that time a number of people heard a female screaming.
She lived at the end of a cul-de-sac, and her bedsit was the final house on the right as you went up. Her door would be in darkness. If you wanted to ambush someone, that would be a good place to do it.
And then a few days after Caroline had disappeared, there was a really, really very, very vicious rape attack.
A single woman living alone in a bedsit was attacked and raped.
This was a vicious, premeditated sexual assault on a young woman who, as a result of it, is terrified, and she's now in a state of shock.
It was suddenly getting very dark because there was the potential connection that the person who had killed Wendy and possibly even taken Caroline had now struck again. Suddenly you're catapulted back into, high state of panic.
And then we had a major breakthrough. A man was arrested. His name was Stuart Durkin.
You have a case at the moment in Dudley Road where a woman has been raped.
It was a very serious attack, and the woman is obviously very distressed.
Durkin admitted the rape. So naturally we thought, well, we've got him. We've got the guy responsible at least for Wendy Nell and perhaps Caroline's disappearance. Durkin further admits over 20 burglaries in the Tunbridge Wells area, and he admitted a burglary at Caroline's bedsit in the September of that year before she'd moved in there. We then started a much more intense scrutiny of Durkin's past. We found out that he was a prowler, he was out on the night Wendy was murdered, and we also discovered he had a conviction for manslaughter in Sweden. So we've got here a very good suspect. In my mind, Durkin was the man. The big problem with Durkin is we needed evidence, hard evidence. We didn't have fingerprints, we had no other bodily fluids, we had no clothing, we had nothing to put Durkin at the scene, either of the disappearance or the murder. We did not have enough to present a case. That left the investigation ongoing. We were back to square one. Our main suspect was gone, and the killer was still out there.
The police started asking me, did I have any idea where she was or where she could have gone? As the days went by, the questions became a bit more intense. I then started feeling quite anxious and nervous, and it soon became totally apparent that they thought I'd killed her. The police started saying, look, we know you've done it. And I didn't know what to do or say. I just said, well, I didn't. Simple as that. They said, no, she left you, you're upset. You've obviously got angry. We believe that, in a fit of anger or jealousy, you've attacked her, gone and hidden the body, and now you've blanked out of your mind. And you don't even know that you've done it. So you might as well confess to it now.
There wasn't a second in anyone's mind that he could have been involved in any way at all in harming her. We all knew that. There was no way.
It was very intimidating. I actually started questioning myself, my God, have I lost my mind? Have I gone and done something? Can I blank out of my head? I was thinking, God, am I going to get put away for something I haven't done?
About 3 weeks after Caroline's disappearance, I was down at the police station, and there was suddenly a buzz. The people were coming into the room, police were coming. Have you heard? Have you seen this? And I said, what's going on?
That particular day, I was driving the tractor cultivator in a field. I came across this dead body down in a ditch. And I realized it was a young woman. She was hardly dressed with any clothes on. She just had tights on. She was lying in about 3 inches of water. From the road, you couldn't see anything. But in the field, you could see her as plain as day. If we wasn't working that particular field that day, she would have been there for who knows how long.
There were 1 or 2 police officers at the scene when I arrived. I looked down at this ditch and there was the body of this young woman in a fetal position, and to me I could see it was Caroline. I realised the similarities straight away between the murder of Caroline and the murder of Wendy Nell. The bludgeoning of the head by some form of blunt instrument, the strangulation and the sexual assaults. Really, there was no doubt in my mind that both girls had been murdered by the same killer.
Well, all we know that at the moment is that she was found wearing only a pair of tights.
There wasn't a lot of evidence attached to the body. We had officers out searching the fields for items of clothing, maybe a handbag, anything that a girl may have been carrying. Nothing was found. If somebody had taken an unconscious girl there in order to rape her, then you would have expected to find something in that area. We found nothing. So I felt that she'd been murdered in Tunbridge Wells and her body was taken there merely to dump it.
The whole thing just seemed so surreal. The sort of realisation that this is your friend who has actually, been murdered in the most awful way. You lose people in life and it's natural, but not like that. No.
Haunting detectives all the time is the fear that they may be hunting for a double killer. In June this year, Wendy Nell was killed and sexually assaulted at her flat just half a mile from Caroline's home.
I did feel people weren't 100% sure. One person actually said, Andy, if you did do it, you really should go forwards and confess and everything. And that was quite heartbreaking. I was just like...
Police now hope that the hunt for clues to Caroline Pierce's killer will lead them to Wendy Nell's murderer as well.
They had no suspect at the time, and there was never any noise about anyone being brought in for questioning.
Today, police appealed for help in tracing a man seen getting into a taxi near Caroline's home shortly after she vanished.
I can actually recall now, at one point, them saying, yeah, we don't think you did it now. Almost in a, I don't know if it's a derogatory way or... But I still didn't know where it was going to go. And all the time, the killer was still out there. And that's something that really never left me.
Today, detectives began the macabre task of searching the cemetery that lies at the bottom of the garden to Caroline's flat.
Of course I was under pressure. But, in my view, we did everything possible in those days that we could have done to find the killer of those 2 girls.
Senior detectives in this case say they're looking for a killer or killers who's both sadistic and vicious.
As the, weeks and months went on, and there's someone out there. There's someone out there who's done this and hasn't been stopped.
17 months after the first murder and 12 months to the day after the second murder, the inquiry is still going on.
You think, what did I miss? Did I go wrong somewhere? I would go back over the ground we'd already covered.
There is evidence here of 900 statements that have been taken. 14,000 people have been interviewed.
Personally, I would have gone on forever.
Last year, there were nearly 150 officers working on the inquiry. Now it's down to a dozen. Anyone with any information is urged to ring Tunbridge Wells 5.
The inquiry was gradually wound down. I felt that I'd failed. And it's not just a failure on your own professional side, it's failing people that were putting their trust in you. Wendy Nell's family, Caroline Pierce's family, we hadn't succeeded in bringing someone to justice. We had a serial killer, and he was still at large.
We couldn't understand how you could do that to two people in relatively quick succession and then there'd be nothing. That you don't just do that and stop. But seemingly he had.
I was 16 years old in 1987 when Wendy and Caroline were murdered. Just doing my GCSEs. As a young officer, a young detective, I didn't think I'd ever work on the case. Between 1987 and 2020, we followed every lead. Every piece of information that came to our attention, we investigated. It was a lot of evidence to work with. On November 16th, 2020, we had a huge breakthrough. And we now knew the person responsible for their deaths. But we found we were dealing with much more than the murders of Wendy and Caroline. The man who we'd arrested was an electrician employed at the Tunbridge Wells Hospital. And within his role, he had access to the entire premises. And this included the mortuary.
Dave wasn't a monster. He wasn't creepy. He wasn't weird. He was always nice to be around. Everyone liked him. Dave had access to everywhere in the hospital. He had free rein to go wherever he liked, whenever he liked. To think that I worked with this guy for 3 years, the fact that 1 minute we could be in the office and the next minute he's committing these horrendous crimes and then, you know, coming back and talking to me like nothing's happened. My whole idea of him flipped within an instant of being told. You know, this is a guy that I trusted. He'd met my kids. Dave wasn't a monster. He was practically invisible. The last person you would ever expect to do what he did.
Back in 1987, the body of a young woman was found. She'd been murdered. Crime Watch did a reconstruction. 5 months later, another girl's body was discovered. Both lived in the same town, in Tunbridge Wells, both killed in the same way. Police thought a serial killer was on the loose, and they launched a massive manhunt. But 20 years on, no one has ever been caught. Detectives have never given up, nor have the victims' families.
The whole thing does change you. Not just what happened, but life in general. The first anniversary came up and the second anniversary came up. It starts to get pushed to the back of the mind, and then before you know it, it's 5 years, 10 years.
A press conference no parent ever wants to attend. Bill and Pam Nell are at Tunbridge police station in the hope that the killer of their daughter will come forward.
It just takes you back to that point again, and you think, will they catch him this time? Is this the time? Is this the breakthrough? And then, no, it's not.
Caroline's body was found by a farm worker. He was lying in a drainage ditch, naked except for a pair of tights.
An unsolved murder that has become a part of my life. It was a massive thing for all of us. And it's not something that you get over.
I think as Dad got sicker, he started to realise he was never going to know what happened to Wendy. In fact, literally weeks before he died, he did a TV appeal with Mum on the sofa.
I've got quite a lot of cancer, and the specialists say they can't do any more for me, but I would really, really like him caught before the end comes, to know who it was, you know.
He was just so determined to do that one more appeal, one more try. It was very sad to think that he wouldn't find out. I accepted then that we were all going to die not knowing. That's it. I sort of gave up.
We never ever close a murder investigation. We want to bring justice and we want to give families answers. We knew at some point during these investigations that the science would catch up with the evidence that we had, and that forensics would be the key to this case.
In 1999, a re-examination was carried out on the duvet from Wendy's bedsit. The duvet had blood staining on it and it had semen found on it. That semen stain was examined more closely and submitted for DNA profiling, and they got a full DNA profile. For the first time in the history of this investigation, we have got a lead. We have a full DNA profile of the man that murdered Wendy Nell. That is our biggest chance to identify who he is.
The profile was put to the National DNA database, but there was no match. So the killer of Wendy Nell hadn't come to police attention for anything previously for us to have sort of lawfully taken a sample of his DNA.
Wendy Nell was found dead in her bedsit in 1987. A full DNA profile of the killer is now central to the investigation. 500 suspects have already been ruled out. In the last few days, fresh leads have come to light and more men in Kent will be asked for DNA swabs.
Year after year, we re-ran that DNA process. For every time that we failed, we did it again. We just hoped that one day, the murderer himself would end up on that DNA database. When she was found in the ditch, that's all she had on. So we believe there may have been potential for semen to be found on those tights. There was a technique that hadn't been used before, so we thought we'd give it a shot. We got a low-level partial result consistent with the full DNA profile we had from the semen on the duvet at Wendy's bedsit. This was a light bulb moment because for the very, very first time in the history of this investigation, we had that full evidential link to show that the man that left the semen on the tights of Caroline Pierce was the same man that left the semen at Wendy Nell's bedsit.
It was the first big breakthrough on the murder of Caroline. We had nothing else except this partial profile.
You can look at the DNA profiles of the people on the DNA database and see if their DNA is genetically similar to your killer. It could be a mother, a father, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, even a son or daughter.
So we took the DNA profile that we'd recovered from Wendy Nell's bedsit and we put that back to the National DNA database. What was returned to us was lists of other profiles that potentially could be relatives of the killer. And we essentially profiled them. We looked at their ages. Were they too old in 1987? Were they too young? Did they live in Tunbridge Wells? Did they have links to Tunbridge Wells? We did all this research and we whittled our list down to 90 people. It was enormous to get to that point. To look at a list of 90 people and think that one of those may have been a relative of our killer. So we got a call from the lab. They had a match. The match had a brother who lived in the Tunbridge Wells area in 1987. He was in his 60s. He worked at Kent and Sussex Hospital, and his name was David Fuller.
Morning. I'm David's place. Hello. I need to come and speak to you. Oh, yes.
David Fuller was already up. He was already dressed.
Right, David, you're under arrest on suspicion of the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce in 1987. Do you understand? Yes.
He seemed very calm.
It's been in your pockets.
One would expect an innocent person to be protesting, and there was just none of that.
Right, yeah, I'm going to take you away now.
It was like he was expecting this day to come.
So the priority was to get his DNA sample and get it directly to the lab as soon as we could to compare it to the DNA at the crime scene.
And literally the next day we had the result. The DNA of David Fuller was a complete match to the semen DNA that was found on the duvet of Wendy Nell, and it also matched the partial DNA that we had on the tights of Caroline Pierce.
His DNA matched the crime scene stains on the pillows, the towel, the duvet, and all the intimate samples of Wendy Nell. It was 1 billion times more likely the DNA came from Fuller than any other person.
My name's Jeff McCreary. I'm a detective constable with Kent Police. Could I have your full name, please?
Yes, David Lewis Fuller.
OK, and your date of...
So we had all this forensic evidence, but we knew that his defence were most likely to try and attack our forensics. In this case, we knew that we also had to build a watertight case against Fuller.
My name is Nikki Hilton. I'm a detective constable also from the Major Crime Department.
You've been arrested on 2 accounts of murder. So I'm going to ask you first of all for you to give your account as to why you're forensically linked to those murders.
I don't know why.
OK.
He spoke politely. He was very quiet and intelligent.
Can you tell me what you know about those murders?
Only what I've heard today.
OK. Only what you've heard today? OK. The reason why I ask that is because you were living in Tunbridge Wells at the time. You may have heard about it.
We asked him whether he knew anything about either the murder of Wendy or Caroline, and he said he didn't. He'd never heard of these murders.
There was a large police presence across Tunbridge Wells. Many media appeals and anniversary appeals.
Fuller was 34 years old in 1987.
You would have become aware of these murders as you lived in the town.
Everybody in the Tunbridge Wells area knew about the murders of Wendy and Caroline. For him to sit in an interview and have no knowledge of the murders of those 2 ladies is absolute rubbish.
Did you seriously assault Wendy Nell within that flat?
No comment.
Do you remember any blood at all?
No comment.
Can you tell me...
When he was arrested, in his wallet was a post-it note with 1987 on it. We suspected that that would be a PIN number. So every time he used his bank card, he would have been transported back to 1987, the year that he killed Wendy and Caroline.
Hi, David. You're going to be charged with 2 offences, so if you just want to listen to what the officer's got to say to you. I don't know, David. Right, you're charged with 4 offences, and that's between the 22nd of June 1987.
So this was the first time anybody had been charged for the murders of Wendy and Caroline.
Murdered Wendy Nell.
It'd been 33 years for these families. They waited for this moment, and that day had arrived.
At the beginning of December 2020, I got a call from Mum. And it was so strange. I just answered the phone and she's like, they got him. Got who? She said, the bloke that killed Wendy, they got him. They think they got him.
When we'd heard this David Fuller had been arrested, it was just disbelief, almost. You know, having waited for an answer for all these years, that yes, perhaps they'd actually got someone now. Well, really?
Totally mixed emotions. Just a overall sense of relief it was sort of over, and some peace for Caroline.
And the weird thing is, I didn't feel anything. You don't feel relief or anything, even when they said it was definitely him. I understood the words. Yep, they've caught him, but I couldn't feel it.
I felt safe. I felt safer that he was now never going to be a danger to anyone else again.
Martin, do you want to come and look at some photos for me?
Are they ones he's taken?
Well,
why does that person look
dead?
One of my CSIs was with the search team. I vividly remember getting a phone call from her, in tears, absolutely distraught and upset. When she finally got her breath back, she explained that while they were searching the study, she was there when they found photographs that appeared to be of dead bodies.
They're literally just in the middle of these, mate. These might easily blow up something.
In our job, We go to crime scenes, we see people who've been violently hurt and injured and murdered, but we don't expect to find someone who's got photographs of dead bodies in their house. And it wasn't just photographs of dead bodies, it was photographs of dead bodies that were being abused in a mortuary setting.
Oh, that first one, was that real or made up?
I don't know.
I suppose my first reaction was complete disbelief. This was an ordinary man. He was married, he had kids. It's difficult to get your head around that any human could even think to do.
Pull that whole thing out, seal it up.
And then they discovered some more.
Actually, Martin, this on the back of his chest of drawers, it looks like he's got some hard drives in there, I would say, stuck to the back.
They found hard drives, computer drives, floppy disks.
That's a SanDisk SSD plus portable hard drive.
We've always wondered whether the person that committed these murders was ever responsible for anything else, but I would never, ever have envisaged this.
As human beings, we always use the phrase, rest in peace. And that just kept playing on my mind. That the one thing that these people are not doing is resting in peace. For 16 years, I'd been a detective sergeant running the county's paedophile unit. And I've developed, I suppose you could call it, a reputation as an expert in dealing with abusive images. I was given hard drives containing what I'm told is mortuary material, but I felt as a sergeant, I can't ask someone to look at this because I don't even know if I could look at this. So I decided that I was going to take on that responsibility. And I remember plugging in the hard drive and kind of taking a deep breath and thinking, right, I'm going to have to look at this. Fuller committed every sexual act that it's possible to do with a human body. The ages of the victims ranged from 9 all the way to a lady who was over 100 years old. He was abusing ladies up to 2 or 3 days before he was arrested. But the earliest footage we found, I think, went back to 2007. Just on the first drive, there was, I think, 897,000 different files, and I had to go through every single one. He had a normal compact digital camera, and he would hold it, position himself. You would literally watch him strip off, completely naked apart from his socks. And there was just utter silence throughout the whole process. There was a complete lack of emotion being shown by him. It seems to me that there's no thought whatsoever for the fact that that is somebody's loved one. That is a person. They may be dead, but they're still a person. And that's one of the things that really sits in your mind, that there wasn't an ounce of humanity demonstrated by him at any point. you do find yourself thinking, what is going on in his mind? And all I can conclude really is that there's no arguing back. There's no resistance. He has complete control. Even the time when he was disturbed and he heard one of the fridges being opened, he switched the lights off. And I'm left watching this darkness and thinking to myself, well, when the lights come back on, surely he's going to be dressed. And then when the lights came back on, he was stood there, still naked. And even then, I kind of think, surely there can't be anything after this. He nearly got caught. And then you open up the next folder and the same thing's happening. It beggars belief in so many ways that he was just treating it in such a normal way. I would look at the stuff, catalogue everything that I found, looking in finite detail at every single part of the body, tattoos and scars and stuff like that. And each time you're looking closer and closer and closer for all of these things that were going to positively identify each of the different victims. And that became quite difficult, for sure. There has been a personal cost. I'm still struggling to deal with what I have seen. But for sure, it's taken me down some very dark holes. I was having flashbacks and nightmares. And it's that point there that I told my wife everything about what was going on, because she needed to understand why I'm sat on the stairs crying my eyes out.
I never expected to be dealing with this type of offending in my career. And I hope I never have to deal with it again. Our inspector told us that we needed to start putting some plans in place to be able to deliver the message to the families that their loved one had been a victim of David Fuller's offending. They've already lost a loved one and dealt with the grief for that loved one. We're then going back to tell them something else has happened to that loved one. That wasn't the end of it. And that could trigger the grief again for people. And that was something that I struggled to deal with.
It was October 2021. And I got a call when I was at work saying I needed to come home pretty quickly. Didn't know why. I think in the minutes that it sort of took them to explain what's been going on, I went through every emotion possible. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt angry at him. I felt sad because I thought my poor mum. And then the sort of last feeling was, no, you must be mistaken. Felt like my heart had been ripped out and that I'd lost her all over again. Mum died in February 2017. She was 48. And my mum was that sort of person that she'd walk into a room and it'd just get brighter. She had that sort of aura about her, that character that just made people smile. I was 15 when she was diagnosed. And she said, I found a lump, I've had it checked, and I've got breast cancer. We knew within probably a month, 6 weeks, that it was incurable. For a long time, I couldn't look at pictures of my mum. All I could see was him and his disgusting, vile face. And I was having nightmares for weeks and weeks. He was literally taking over my life, and I'd never met him. When you're unwell, you go to a hospital, because that's a safe environment. That's where you go to get better. And I think when we left her there on the 10th of February when she died, we never for a minute thought that she was in any danger. And then to know that actually that place that we thought was safe is actually the place that she was actually at her most vulnerable.
In January of 2021, the team produced Fuller out of custody and interviewed him for the first time about the mortuary offending.
So, do you know when you started at Kent and Sussex Hospital?
In 1989.
What was your role there?
Electrician.
Electrician, okay.
Dave was known by everyone. He'd worked in the previous Kent and Sussex Hospital and then moved on to the new Pembury Hospital.
Did you have access to all areas or?
Probably everywhere.
As a senior electrician, there wasn't really any restrictions for Dave. He had responsibilities to carry out jobs in the hospital, whether that means that he has to go to A&E, to the maternity wards. There was nothing ever really stopping him to go wherever he liked.
And did you do much work in the mortuary?
Yeah, we did quite a lot in there, yes.
There was nothing odd about him needing to go and do jobs in the mortuary. They had a lot of faults on the temperature sensors for the body freezers. They would often ask Dave to go and have a look at them because I don't think anyone else really knew how they worked or how to repair them. Dave always worked the late shifts. They were the best times for Dave to go and carry out his maintenance work because there was no one there.
Do you need a swipe card to get through there?
There's a key.
There's a key.
The entrance to the mortuary was directly opposite our office. So while I'm going about my shift, he's literally just on the other side of the door, sexually abusing a dead body.
Is there about approximately 80 allegations of sexual penetration with corpses? So whereabouts should we start? Where do you feel comfortable starting to talk about?
I'm not comfortable at all. But,
no. Do we help you?
For him, it's all about making it easy for himself. That's the impression I get from him.
Why did you record what was going on?
I don't know why.
It's all about minimising his actions. I can only assume to make him feel better.
What age range are we talking about?
60, 70, something like that.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly.
Okay, and the youngest?
Yeah, I know what you're going to say. 9.
He didn't seem to be concerned over the victims and their families. He seemed to be more concerned about what people will think of him.
I'm admitting the offences, but I don't really want to go into detail.
Yeah. Okay.
If you appreciate that.
And he's never explained why he's done it. He's only ever said, I admit those offences. So maybe there is shame there, but I don't think shame's the same as remorse, and I think the shame is being found out.
I need to just say something about the whole thing, because to go through all this in detail today, right now, I'm just totally exhausted. I've admitted everything. I can't deal with it. I can't deal with it. Every single thing you're saying to me is killing me off. Honestly, it really is. So
if you could say something to David Fuller now, what would you say?
I just want to know why. Why? Why would you do this? Why would you destroy lives? I don't know what I'd say to him. I think I'd cry. I generally do. I think if he was sat in front of me right now, I'd burst into tears.
I'm a firm believer that he has used his access through the hospital probably as soon as he got there in 1989. And that's probably why we've never seen any more murders, because he's getting his necrophilia fixes through his employment.
I'm not insane. I may have some sort of residual personality problems, which, you know, I've gone a completely almost Christian life and the deadliest life all together at the same time, with no crossovers. You know, it's just two different personalities.
We still had to take Fuller to trial for the murders of Wendy and Caroline. We couldn't risk this case falling apart at any point.
His defence said they would challenge the reliability and accuracy of the DNA evidence. We had to prove to the jury that there is nobody else involved in these murders.
We know that David Fuller is the killer. Our biggest fear was that he would walk free. Fuller was a hoarder. When our team searched his address, they found pieces of evidence that all linked together to build our case. In the original 1987 investigation, officers found a blouse in Wendy's bedsit, and on the cuff of that blouse was a bloodied footwear mark. Back in 1987, they identified that as coming from a Clark sports trainer. This is a photograph of Fuller taken in the mid-80s. You almost couldn't believe it. You could see the soles of his shoes almost perfectly. And the sole mark matched to the bloodied mark that was found on the cuff of Wendy's blouse.
Wendy Nell was strangled to death and sexually assaulted in her flat in Guildford Road. So to your knowledge, have you ever been to Guildford Road in Tunbridge Wells?
We found a document for a vehicle registered in 1979 to David Fuller, and at the time Fuller was living at Guildford Road in Tunbridge Wells. So he did know Guildford Road and he lied to us. We also found a number of these envelopes. These are Super Snap photograph envelopes. There was a Super Snaps branch in Tunbridge Wells, and that's the branch that Wendy was the manageress of.
Do you remember this restaurant? Quite popular at the time. Buster Brown's.
No comment.
He was asked if he knew about Buster Brown's, the bar that Caroline used to work at. He had nothing to give us. This is his 1986 diary. There's a diary entry for him, Fuller, at Buster Brown's on the 19th of November 1986, just over a year before he abducted Caroline. This is the London to Brighton bike ride. Fuller took part in this ride the day before Wendy's murder. And this is a service record for Fuller's car. On the 23rd of June 1987, he had his vehicle serviced in Tunbridge Wells. He's ridden the London to Brighton bike ride, he's murdered Wendy, and then the next day he's had his vehicle serviced. It's like he's two people in one. He leads a normal life, going about his own daily business, and then, on the other hand, he's out murdering women.
There was a huge anxiety about having to give evidence at his trial. I didn't want to see him. The thought of being in the same room, I was not the slightest bit courageous about this at all, but it was just horrific.
He never looked anyone in the eye, he just sat there with his head down most of the time.
We expected the trial to last for 3 to 4 weeks. Day 3, our forensic scientist was presenting the vast quantity of DNA that had been located at Wendy Nell's bedsit. Whilst the scientist was giving evidence, the proceedings were just stopped. They were stopped by the defence team.
There's some more breaking news, and that is that David Fuller has pleaded guilty to both murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce.
The former hospital worker was arrested in December last year after new DNA evidence linked him to 2 separate attacks in 1987.
He has today really thrown in the towel and has accepted he committed those murders.
We'd spent months and months and months building up to this trial, and you could feel a sense of relief throughout the court.
And it's true to say that feelings are running very high inside and outside court today.
Oh my God. All done, guilty. Finished. That was it. The police had kept saying to us, you must be aware there is some dreadful stuff that's going to come out, some really, really bad stuff. And we're going, well, he raped and murdered our friend. How much worse can it be?
So in court, my sister was literally a couple of metres from him, and she said that he didn't show any sort of remorse, wasn't crying, anything like that. And it made her angry because she thought, is this bloke even human? He had every opportunity to say, I'm sorry, I have done this, I'm so sorry. And he could have and he didn't. And I think that just sums him up as a person.
It doesn't change anything. She's still gone. We've had a whole life of feeling that way. So even though he's been caught, nothing really has changed.
I just can't understand the mind of such a man. He has to be so twisted beyond the normal human understanding. But if it hadn't been for the work we did then, they wouldn't have got that killer today.
He deserved those sentences. There's no doubt about it. He should never be allowed out of prison.
As awful as those mortuary crimes are, we have to remember that in 1987, this man committed crimes against 2 innocent young women, horrific crimes, and we should not forget that.
Death is sacrosanct to all of us. We will all experience it sometime in our lives. And when you see what he did, you realise that even that is not sacred anymore.